go through a brief explanation of the difference between the um, alley retrieval reports and the Clearview reports that you use to collect prepaid? Or
Sure.
prepaid, I mean.
So before all of the 911 centers were on the EZNet, we were using the alley retrieval reports to determine call volume for purpose of distributing the prepaid wireless revenue. And I think everybody on this call knows, but for anybody who's watching on the video, so the prepaid wireless 911 charge, which is paid by prepaid customers at point of sale. It's a flat per transaction rate. Right now it's $1.62, and in January it's going up to $1.71. That is distributed to all of the 911 governing bodies, and statute says we have to do it based on wireless 911 calls taken by all of the 911 centers associated with that governing body. In a couple places that gets a little awkward if the 911 center is taking 911 calls for more than one governing body. So we have to figure out, okay, which governing body is the most associated with that PSAP. But in most cases, it's a fairly clear relationship. Before all of the 911 centers were on the EZNet, the only thing we had to go by was the alley retrieval report that Lumen sends out for every PSAP in the state. They were sending those out to you guys, but they were also sending us copies of those. I was never entirely comfortable using those for that purpose because an alley retrieval report is not really a count of how many 911 calls you get. It's a count of how many times your phone system made a request for alley information, which can happen multiple times on a single 911 call. Lumen had supposedly done some magic on it, and there were actually two volume numbers on those reports. If you look at those reports that you get from Lumen, if you're still getting them, you'll see that there are actually two volume numbers on those reports. One is higher than the other. What they do is they adjust the amount based on a formula that they have to say that, okay, if they do a retrieval report on the same number, the same phone number within a certain period of time, then we will discount that and only count it once. But even with that formula in place, I was never entirely comfortable using those, but it was the only thing we had, so that's what we used, and it was what the governing bodies decided to use way back in 2011 when the prepaid surcharge first went into place. Starting with this year, though, we were able to use call volumes from Clearview, although it's no longer called Clearview, now it's Intrado Insights, and those are actual counts of calls that are being delivered to the 911 center over the EZNet, and has nothing to do with alley retrieval or alley requests. So that was the difference between the two numbers. The amount of calls that they were showing total was much lower, but if you look at the percentages for every governing body in the state and how much they were getting, it was fairly close. It wasn't exactly close or exactly the same, but it was fairly close, and there were changes from year to year anyway. So it's not really clear to me if it would have made a difference to keep using the alley retrieval report, but based on everything I understand of the alley retrieval reports and the information we're getting through Intrado Insights, the information through Intrado Insights should be more accurate. So that's what we're using now. And I can throw on the screen here a copy of the spreadsheet I use. Maybe it'll come up.
I think this is Matt.
Go ahead, Matt.
I think we've had this discussion a couple of times in some of the larger groups as well. And the folks who were concerned or greatly concerned were willing to accept that basis until we got to a better way of tracking the calls.
Although I will say that since we switched to this, I did get contacted by a couple of 911 authorities because their percentage went down based on this new methodology. And I understand the concern. Their thought was that they were getting undercounted, but I don't have any way to prove that they are being undercounted in a way that's different from any other 911 authority. Even if there is undercounting going on, we have to be able to show, well, my 911 authority is getting undercounted more than my neighbor or the one across the state. because otherwise the percentages still work out because it's
when Bruce was still at Arapahoe, he contacted me with the same questions, wondering if I had any input about why his ECATs was so different than even these numbers.
Yeah. And the thing is, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jackie.
I'm sorry. I didn't realize the ECAPS was different, but I did when we first got this new way of doing it. Two of the authorities that I worked for went down a little bit, so I did look at their numbers, and their numbers were similar enough in what their CPE was capturing that we decided that it was similar enough that it looked okay to us. So.
Yeah, my counsel to Bruce at the time was, I hear what you're saying, but like Daryl just said, I don't know that we have a way to refute the difference one way or the other. And this is the agreed upon method for the interim. So,
and I will say too that this is also temporary because, it's a litigated proceeding right now, so I can't talk a whole lot about it, but. I haven't seen anybody say they don't want to see ECATs move forward just because the tariff has been suspended. It was suspended because they want to look at the pricing and they want to make sure that it's including all of the reports. So if we make the assumption that we will have ECATs at some point in the future, then we will switch to that instead of this. So this is still a temporary measure. But in the meantime, what I'm doing is so once a month, I am going into Intrado Insights, and I have access to the call volume data for every PSAP in the state. And I am filling in this spreadsheet. And really, for our purposes, we're only worried about the wireless, but in order to track for trending purposes, I also put in the spreadsheet the VoIP and the wireline, and then total it for each governing body. It's a little hard to see here because it's so small on the screen, but and then for each 911 authority, I have the wireless call volume right here that is totaled for the entire for every PSAP in that 911 authority. This was a bad example, Adams County, because they had 0 at their backup center, which is their other PSAP. But if you look at Arapahoe, for example, they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 PSAPs. This is the total wireless call volume for all 5 PSAPs. And then this is the percentage of their call volume as a portion of the total wireless call volume statewide. And that is so far this fiscal year, because we start in July. So really it's just for 2 months, July and August. And then in October, I'll pull the numbers for September. So I always pull them a month behind, so that I'm making sure that I'm getting a full month's worth of data. Couple of things that are of interest. We've got a couple of 911 authorities that don't have any PSAPs. For instance, Cheyenne County, their calls are being taken by Kit Carson. Kit Carson has a separate 911 authority. So there's a couple of PSAPs that don't get any money out of this arrangement, simply because they have 0 wireless call volume. And then down here at the bottom, I keep separate track of 2 different groups of PSAPs. This one is PSAPs that are not included because in the total volume, because they don't have a governing body. And if they don't have a governing body, they can't get money from the prepaid surcharge, because that's how it's set up in the statute. And that's just 3 of the military bases, Air Force Academy. And I think that one might actually, well, no, that one, I don't know if that one's changing or not, but there are others in El Paso Teller that are part of the El Paso Teller governing body, but the Air Force Academy is not, Shriver is not, and Buckley is not. Matt, go ahead.
Just a question for confirmation that OSETSA is folded in to METSA's under Wesco Dispatch.
Yes, I have OSETSA as having no PSAP, so all of that wireless call volume for OSETSA, because it's being answered by
Wesco.
Yeah, by Wesco, is being attributed to Montrose.
Okay, that's covered by our intergovernmental agreement. I'm just looking for confirmation. Thanks.
Yep. And then we've got some PSAPs that are not included in the call stats because they're either transfers only, so they're not receiving any 911 calls directly from the public, or they are a training center. And therefore, any 911 calls they get should not be counted because they're not coming from members of the public. They're coming for training purposes. So example of that, we've got Denver has its own training PSAP with its own 911 lines, but they only use it for training purposes. You can see they've got 0 call volume anyway, but if they did have calls, they wouldn't be counted towards Denver's distribution. And then the same thing for DIA. DIA does not take any 911 calls directly. They only take 911 calls that have been transferred to them from Denver. And then the same thing for South Metro Fire. They receive their 911 calls transferred from other PSAPs. But those are the only 3 that are excluded other than these 3 military bases because they don't have governing bodies. So every other PSAP and PSAP site, including backup sites, are included in the master spreadsheet up here that counts toward the statewide call volume. And I imagine that when we do switch to ECATs, I'll use a very similar spreadsheet. I'll just be pulling them from ECATs instead of from Clear Intrado Insights. So the numbers might be slightly different. And I think ECATs breaks it down by more types of class of service. I think they break it down by all of the classes of service that show up on ALI, whereas Intrado Insights just breaks it down between VoIP, wireless, and wireline, and then occasionally you get a unknown, which might be a satellite call or something like that. Here's an unknown. They don't have any, but they have one at one time, which is why the field is there. But in ECATs, I believe they actually break it down by ALI class of service, so there'll be more classes of service on here.
Well, that looks good. Any questions on that? I know, like I said, I was one of those people who reached out to Daryl in the beginning and said, hey,
Yep.
because our numbers did change. But again, from the research we did, just number to number, they were fairly close.
And if anybody's curious, I can pull up your percentages right now, but that's only based on 2 months worth of data, so it'll probably change significantly before the end of the fiscal year, which is next June. So like for Montrose, let's pull that up. Montrose's current percentage, if we are pulling the percentages today, it would be 0.72. I don't know what that compares to what you're getting now. But again, that's only based on 2 months worth of data. So if that's way off, I wouldn't worry too much about it. We can check in again next year and see where it's at.
You bet.
Cool.
Thank you, Daryl. Like I said, I wanted to make sure we went over that for the prepaid wireless so that everybody had a good understanding. And hopefully those who couldn't join us will be able to listen to the video and see what we're talking about. This is also the prepaid and collections committee. So I wanted to bring up a couple things that I have on my pointed little head. One of them is I've been doing some reconciliation of line counts for several authority boards now. And there are several of them that would really be interested in doing some type of an audit because the numbers are weird, for lack of better words. The numbers aren't exactly what we would expect them to. And some of that has to do with population growth in some of those areas. The numbers definitely do not track with population growth. And then billing with wireless, and Matt, I'll get you in just a second, but wireless billing these days, most people sign up for a wireless phone 20 years ago, and whatever your bill was then is probably what the address is now. Because we're paying on it online and we're not necessarily changing those addresses. Matt, go ahead.
Other than just for the sake of truing up understanding of the data, with the tariff not being dependent on those numbers anymore, what's the reason for spending time and money on this?
Well, and that, yeah, thank you for that, because that was exactly part of my questions too, because I'm looking at it going, well, now that, you know, we're definitely able to collect more and that kind of thing. Is it worth it? I don't know. I know that one of the authorities I'm looking at, there's one huge cell phone company that emits 10 lines. when the others are remitting thousands?
What we're finding here, just anecdotally, right, without doing any analysis, is a lot of businesses have been switching to VoIP, and their one PRI ends up in the alley database, not all of their DIDs, for example. And so that, at least around here, that seems to be what we're seeing as looks like skewing relative to what things used to be, as well as relative to population and business growth. A lot of VoIP carriers, they're just putting in, a single trunk, whereas the business used to have 10 POTS lines. We're seeing things like that. But I'm a data person, right? So I'm curious, but I don't know that Metza would want to spend a lot of time or effort on this, since it doesn't affect the tariff.
So it doesn't affect billing, but would it affect what you expect to see in terms of remittances?
Yeah, it could. We here certainly don't have, for example, the breadth of phone companies that Jeff Irvin has to track for remittances. We receive 80 remittances a month, 80 different phone companies. And I look at that and I shake my head when I think about, the only real way to get to the bottom of that would be to audit every one of them. And that for us here, that's just not realistic at the moment.
Right.
And we tend to look at it on aggregate, rather than trying to get in the nitty-gritty of line counts and what have you. We're just looking more for trends and under remittance, are the big four somehow, is there a hole in what they're remitting? And
that's what I'm doing, Jeff. And we do check every remittance every month. Just last month, I caught MetTel shorting us and had to, chase them down and force them to agree to a makeup payment. So we check those every single month, and we watch that trend pattern, like you're saying, Jeff. That's just a lot more feasible, I guess, for us.
And Jeff, I think you use a standard form that you have all of the providers fill out, right?
well, we have, they remit a return, but I have one that for those that don't have a return, that their company like GSA Associates or somebody uses that they can use. But generally they generate their own return. They're all very similar.
Okay. Because I had a 911 authority contact me just today wanting to know how they can figure out how many lines they're supposed to have in their area. And really the only way to know that is to try to get that information from the carriers themselves through self-reporting, either through a return or through a form that you have them fill out to send in with their payment. And the statute actually requires them to fill out any form that you provide them as part of their payment.
Yeah.
So we
and
have.
Maybe we should.
Sorry,
Go
Jeff.
ahead. Good. And Jackie used to do that kind of work for us at one time, and I told Kathy that she might want to talk to Jackie. Jackie's kind of the pro from Dover when it comes to that stuff.
So we do the same. We have a standard form that we require them to use. But honestly, these are I don't know if you can see them. Maybe not. My face in the way. These are the two most common forms.
It's too much like a green screen. It's trying to.
They're similar, just formatted differently. Same information. And probably 90% of our returns use one of these two forms. I'm working on them now, actually.
I think you're losing your transporter lock.
Beam me up, Scotty. And that's true. As you're talking, Matt, I just finished looking at Arapahoe's again, and in 2021 they had 174 telephone companies. So Jeff, I'm sure yours are more than that. And I'm not seeing as much problem with VoIP carriers, to tell you the truth. Obviously the landlines are issue, but as you said, they're switching from landline to VoIP, and Eventually, I imagine there won't really be any landline. Um,
Or at least not analog.
yeah, part of what I'm thinking is one, the form. I know we received those 2 standard forms. There's 3 of them I received that are a little bit, there's one more that's a little bit different than yours. They don't tell you what type of service they're remitting always. And this
Yeah.
company is not even sending an email address or a phone number to get a hold of them. That's, I think, Jeff, the GSA. And it's been a nightmare to get a hold of them. I.e., for each company, you can't send them an email and say, I have these 10 companies and I need this, because you have to send somebody different for each company
Mhm.
under them. And so anyway, it's been kind of a nightmare. And so I was hoping there was an appetite, and I don't know there is, I'm just bringing this to the committee. Is there an appetite for doing something like, as a committee, we going and saying, we want this information on your forms? Matt, go ahead.
2 things. The elephant in the room is that the carriers back into their line counts on these remittance forms. They take the amount collected, they divide it by the rate to get the number of lines, and that's what they put on these forms for the number of lines. They don't actually put the real number of lines on. And part of that, especially for the large carriers, is the difficulty in tracking and calculating the number of actual customers as customers come and go over a 30-day period. And so they just take the easy way out, and they just look at the amount collected divided by your charge, and that's your line count. Yeah, I've run into this with numerous carriers ever since we started raising our local rate. Starting with our jump to $1.75, and then a couple of subsequent increases as the threshold was increased. And I would agree with your findings that you can't just contact GSA or what's that big one in Florida, CSI Longwood. Anyway, you can't just contact them and do a blanket approach. You have to literally do it carrier by carrier by carrier with an individual who is responsible or able to make those changes and corrections. I think one thing that everyone in the state could benefit from is if this committee, and I'm not stepping forward to do it, but if we could have a maintained list of current appropriate contacts for notifications of charge increases. Now that we're raising our rates on a somewhat regular basis, I spend a lot of time chasing down current contacts to notify them of our rate increases. And many of us are going to be doing this every year that the threshold changes. Lots of us are going to be now taking this on as an annual project we do every year as we track the inflation-based threshold. And so, who's going to do that? I don't know. Can we volunteer Jolene to do it for us? Because who among us at the local level has the time to do that on behalf of the state? So that would be the second issue is, how much time could we save by one person tracking that very well for us?
Well, this is Jackie, and that was one of the things I was going to ask too. I know Jolene has a link that I can go to that has everything they receive in the state surcharge and their information, but sometimes it differs from what I have.
A lot of times. And
I do know Compliance Solution, if you have Jessica's email, she will take the bulk. Just a heads up. GSA is the only company I haven't been able to take a bulk on.
I have a spreadsheet just like Jeff's.
Yeah, I've been since we did our last ETC increase, I've been trying to keep this up religiously every time I get a notice of proceeding from the PUC or something, and I look through for addresses or new telephone service providers that I can add to this list. So This is the one I've been maintaining.
And Jeff and I
wonder-
compared ours a few years ago, Jeff,
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
it?
I
Well,
wonder,
I
Jeff,
don't
if we-
do as good a job of maintaining mine. Jeff, I just update it once a year, but
Jeff, since yours is probably the biggest one in the state, I wonder if we could start with yours, and then, as people find, oh, this has changed, because I don't, honestly, I don't think even we, I don't want to volunteer Jolene for this either, to be calling them on a weekly basis to find out if their contact has changed. But if anybody finds out a contact has changed, they could let us know. Maybe we could even have a form on the website for them to let us know, and then we can update our list. Do you guys think that would be useful? Do you think that would get out of sync too quickly?
I think it'd be great if you guys have the time.
And I think it would be great too. However, like I said, I have probably a larger list than Jeff because I have more around the state than Jeff does, in different areas of the state. So I have
Okay.
some that Jeff
Or
doesn't
maybe
have.
we could get both of them and combine them.
And I would love to do that. I think the problem, and I'm wondering if a form would help, or the company. So Jeff and I talked to a guy who was going to do this fancy dandy thing where everybody could remit through the bank account and fill out the remittance form, and you'd have access to all that digitally and automatically. In lack of that, what I was wondering is if we had a form that we said you must fill out your email address every time it changes. So at least you can track the email address. And I don't know how that works, because I know for me, a lot of times I'll go back to look at a company and they're different as we go along through the years. Go ahead, Matt.
that list of telecom, there's two lists at the state. Is it Dora? Dora. The list of all of the telecommunications companies.
Well, we keep a list on the program website.
One is for agents, and the other is for regulatory contacts.
Oh, yeah.
And that they are almost always wildly out of date because staff come and go, and no one thinks to call you or the appropriate person to update that.
And we don't use those lists either. So the
Okay.
other list that's on the 911 program webpage, and let me put it up on the screen here, is we actually get that from our custodial agent that collects the state surcharges for us.
Uh-huh.
And, the contact might be different for local charges versus state charges, but I think probably in a lot of cases, it's probably the same. And I get an updated list. I ask them for an updated list quarterly. So you can see this one was just updated last week. Now, these can change, and they don't tell the company either. And because they're making automatic payments on their surcharges, maybe the custodial agent doesn't find out, so it doesn't get updated here. But this is the list we have that we use when we have to try to contact them. And you can see we've got quite a few on here.
The other thing I wanted to add is that sometimes, because we have a space on our actual remittance form that asks for the preparer information, and one of the things to fill out is the email. So a lot of times, if this doesn't pan out, I'll go back to what they remitted, their remittance form, and use that contact information there. And since they're the ones that filled it out and prepared the remittance form, they're usually pretty receptive. And if they don't know, if they're not the ones to go to, they know where to go to. So that might be something to consider on your forms if you're changing them.
Are any of these mandatory? Sometimes when I think about the requirement that we as authorities provide at least 60 days notification, if that were to be contested, well, whose list did you use such that it was authoritative to meet the requirement?
Well, the statute doesn't say whose list you have to use. And so I don't, based on that, I wouldn't say that there is an authoritative list. We have a list. Each of you can make your own list. It would be good if we had a common list that everybody was using, though, which I think is maybe something this committee could work on.
And I'd perhaps be happy to provide my list. I'm just not real sure if all of them are up to date because I know some of my data goes back to 2003 and every telecom that's ever been in there is still in my list. I have tried to go back and mark the ones who are out of business as an inactive. However, I'm sure I've missed a number of them, but I have like over 500 companies in my list.
Not to mention name changes. Whew.
Yeah, name changes and all that. And so I started with my remittance. I actually started going by the federal ID number, tax ID number, which helps track name changes. Because usually if it's just a merger or something, a name change, they'll keep their federal ID number. Versus if they sold out or something, the number will change. So I don't know, does this committee have an appetite to take this on? Because you're right, Matt, I am also in the process of working right now with 2 different authorities who want to up their surcharge and getting that list out to them. And it's kind of a mess.
Yeah, I think we should. I know it's a huge lift. Matt can't volunteer Jolene, but I can. But I will also help you, Jolene, because I do think this is something that we as the state office should be helping with. Not that we need to do it all alone, but I think if we can get your list, Jackie, and Jeff's list, and maybe we can identify someone else who might have a really big list. I don't know if Denver would be able to provide that because they do it through all through their city tax department. But if we could put together a combo list and merge it with this one and try to figure out what's most up to date and then start trying to maintain it going forward, maybe that could be our definitive list statewide. And one thing we could do, I don't think we can, go out to them on a regular basis and ask for updates, but maybe a couple times a year, like maybe 3 months before February 1st and 3 months before June 1st. Because if you have to do a notification to all the carriers, you have to do it 60 days before those 2 effective dates. So that would be a good time to make sure it's up to date. And it could just be a matter of emailing the companies and saying, this is what we've got on file for you for your contact information. If there are any changes to local emergency telephone charges, if there's a different contact or you need to update anything, let us know.
Oh, I like that idea a lot. That would be awesome. I mean, because like it sounds like right now, Jeff's doing something, Matt's doing something, I'm doing something, and everybody else who's going to raise their surcharge is doing something at this time to try to get a good list, and that's not being shared out to everybody. Because the other thing I've had my authorities do is once they send out their email, I've had them send any bounce backs to me so that I can then go research them to see why they're bouncing back and who needs to get them.
And Jeff, I just got your list, so thank you.
Daryl, to do a little technical stuff to get mine to you.
Okay. And Jackie, I understand too. You're running a business, so I think it's very generous of you to be willing to share your list.
Yeah, I do not mind sharing my list. I mean, the authority board's paid for that list, so I'm sure they don't mind me sharing it back out.
And the other thing that I wanted to bring up as part of this is, would it be helpful to have a template form for 911 governing bodies to require the carriers to fill out? Because I know some of you do that. Apparently some 911 authorities are not doing that. For those that aren't doing that, we can't say every governing body has the right to come up with their own form, but maybe we can provide them with a template that they could use to start from if they choose to.
I think that would be great. I think that's what Kathy Really's looking for right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would really like that too, because like I said, there's the one company that doesn't provide you any information except for a telco number, phone number.
It would also help reinforce the fake line counts by type.
Mm-hmm.
Our form our form lists all three types of service on the same form. For example, we have a mom and pop phone company that provides 2 out of the 3 services, and they're looking at possibly adding the third, VoIP. So, yeah, but it's interesting. There's one VoIP company that we receive remittances for that claims that they're landlines. I'm like, well, no, they're not. You might call it landline, but it's not. It's VoIP. So you still have to suss that out.
Yeah. And frankly, it's getting a little more difficult over time to define which is which, because, okay, it's wireless, but it's wireless over Wi-Fi. So is it really wireless or is it VoIP?
Mhm.
And then
Yep.
landline that's using VoIP for the backbone, is it really a landline or is it VoIP?
Yeah.
I think eventually everything's VoIP. But
And then there are the sub corporations of the big companies that remit. And so, AT&T sends us a small remittance in the AT&T name. And then they send us an extremely large remittance that's all for wireless. And we have learned that small remittance is not for AT&T wireless. It's for backhaul that is interconnected. So it's actually VoIP. It's actually they're IP connected, but they're interconnected lines. And so they're not actually for wireless. They're for VoIP. We have the same with Verizon, under their very different names.
Verizon has several different names.
Right. And so there's one check that is clearly, obviously for the actual wireless customers. And then there's another one under a different Verizon corporate name that we've determined is actually their IP, interconnected IP. So we classify those as VoIP.
And Jeff, is this the one you've asked people to send their information
Yeah,
on?
This is a generic form that we use for people that, don't have GSA or somebody reporting for them that are contact us and are looking for how to remit.
But you have not asked GSA or the other companies to use this form?
No. They have their own.
Right.
We've always just used whatever they send us.
And technically, they're required to use the form you give them, but only if you require them to.
Right.
Well, and again, like Jeff, I don't care that they use their own form. I just want to make sure they're giving me some contact information.
And we just make sure that they're, using the right rate when they remit. And
I'm looking where we have our surcharge form for the state.
Jeff, are you allowing them to remit several months at a time?
If we're talking just a few lines, we do, but if they were a large remitter, we'd require that they do it per statute.
That's why you have that grid.
Yeah, if they're a little mom and pop and if they're reporting 4 lines or 2 lines or something, where the cost of the check to send it is more than what.
Gotcha. So my board took a hard line with this one based on what the statute says, shall be monthly unless otherwise allowed by the authority. And my board said monthly.
Yeah.
So our form is structured a little different, where instead of having check boxes for each type of service, we actually have sort of a grid like you have at the bottom, but each row is then for one type of service, line count, gross, 2% retained, and then total remitted. And then, so those are subtotals on each record, and then a grand total at the bottom.
That's the danger of asking the question.
Right.
Right. And I've required everybody to do monthly remittance, even if it's one. Only because for me, it's just easier to keep track of that they're doing it right. I don't think that if they're remitting 0, that they need to do anything other than remit once a year a statement that said I don't have any. And there's I don't know, I have about 10 companies that remit 0. Do you know how many you have, Jeff?
No, I don't.
I have about 10.
Yeah, 10, 15, somewhere in there. They remit 0 every month. And it seems like, well, no wonder you're going out of business. You keep stamping an envelope and sending it to me. So it would, I'm pleased that the committee wants to take on at least the contact list, and I get that there's not really a huge appetite for audits, and that we probably ought to do that individually still. There isn't any way.
We also now have a mechanism in commission rules where the commission may agree to pay for a locally conducted audit, and there's a section of our rules about filing an application to get payment or get funding for an audit. It's never been used, but it was put in there after the surcharge, the state surcharge went into effect.
Okay.
And I always try to
an individual one. I'm sorry, Jeff, I walked on you.
And I always try to just imagine in my mind how that would be conducted. You know, is it still going to be an honor system, or how are they going to? Somebody actually going to go in and, you know, review the dusty tomes, or
that is a good question, Jeff. Since I've never actually seen an audit of a telecommunications company proving how many lines they have or how many lines they don't have, that's a good question, Jeff. I'm not sure what that would look like.
Yeah, I have trouble imagining how you would get past the door to do that.
Do you guys want to see the form that we're using for the state surcharge?
Yes, please.
I was able to get that pulled up. We'll be updating this for 2023 fairly soon, but this is the one that they'll be using until the end of this year. So all the stuff, all of the fields that are highlighted in yellow are automatically calculated, but they put in the date that they're filing it, the month that this is for. They have to enter how many months late this is, if it's late. If it is paid on time, then they enter 0 because it automatically calculates a late fee for them. Company name, Solix code, that'll be changing because the company we use to collect these for us is called Solix, but that company is changing. So we might just change it to company code. And then they enter how many lines, landlines they have, TDM/landline, wireless lines, voice over internet protocol lines. It calculates all 3 of those. They also have to enter how many federal lifeline customers they have and how many lines that they have that they were unable to collect on. Because technically they do not have to remit for lines that they didn't collect on. So if they have, let's say, 10 of their customers statewide didn't pay their bill last month, they don't have to remit that. They only have to remit after the customer pays.
Have you seen them fill that out?
Jolene, have you seen them use that field? Have any of them used that field?
Yes. Yes, they have.
Then there's quite a few calculations here because there are different things that different surcharges are exempt from. So for instance, TRS is exempt from lifeline customers are exempt from paying TRS, but they're not exempt from paying 911 or 988. So we have to calculate that as well. So there's a different section for calculating each of the 3 surcharges. And then at the bottom, it will tell them, this is what you owe for 911, this is what you owe for 988, this is what you owe for TRS. And they have to actually pay 3 separate checks to our company Solix. There's actually 3 separate lock boxes that they pay those to. Some of that will probably be changing as we switch to a new vendor. And then at the bottom, we do ask for an email as well as their name and phone number. And then if it's approved by someone that might be different than the person who prepared it, they have to give their name and sign it. And then each company has to file this with us. They file it in a proceeding at the commission. So these are typically public record. A few of the companies do file them confidentially, which they're allowed to do because it contains, they don't want their competitors to know how many customers they have in the state. but most of the companies are just filing them.
So
So
do they
then,
file
isn't
them
this the
monthly?
source of? Go ahead, Jackie.
I'm sorry, do they file them monthly?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead,
So
Jeff.
then, isn't this the source of the line count information that we need?
Well, for statewide, yes, but it won't tell you how many lines are in each governing body's jurisdiction.
Yeah.
That's the problem. If we had them on this form, break it down by governing body, but frankly, I don't know if they could do that or would do that.
So you could try to do a checksum against ECATs with this.
Well, ECATs will just show you the number of calls coming in, not how many lines there are.
I mean, yeah.
Now, if every governing body was, sending us their line counts that they've calculated from their information,
Mhm.
then we could combine it all and compare
Yeah.
it to this and see if it adds up. But I don't know that we get all the governing bodies to cooperate with that either.
Or have the wherewithal to do that.
Right.
Yeah, the bandwidth to do that. But this at least this is where your contact information is coming from, correct?
Yes. Yeah, this is where, so that list that I showed you earlier of all the carriers, that is a list that we get from Solix. Solix is getting that information from this, as well as from the companies also have to fill out a registration form with us when they enter the market. So it's a combination of those two sources. Did I say that right, Jolene? Jolene knows this stuff better than me. She nodded her head, so I'm right.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're supposed to update it, right? They're supposed to notify us 15 days within changing their contact information. Some of them actually do file that too, but it's just a handful. So
And one thing we're looking at with our new company that we're switching to is having them do this through an online form instead of, right now this is a downloadable PDF. But in the future they may be able to do it online and pay online as well, which will be better for them and might help us get better compliance.
So if they do all that online, then it would create a database that would keep track.
Right. I mean, there's a database now, but it's all being entered by data entry monkeys at the company.
Right. Which is the same thing we're all doing.
Yeah.
I do sometimes look like a monkey, but okay. Well, I think this has been a very productive meeting. What do you guys think? Is there anything else we would need to bring up at this meeting or talk about? I think that Daryl, I will get you my list. You have Jeff's, and let us know what you want us to do.
Yeah, I think if you guys want to send me copies of your forms, we can start working on that as well, creating a standard template form. And I don't imagine it'll be that difficult. We'll just sort of combine what we've got from the different forms and then maybe bring a draft to the next meeting.
That would be great. I don't have a form. I use the companies, which is why I'm frustrated, I suppose. Go ahead, Matt.
Doesn't the Resource Center already have a template form on their website?
I don't know. Let me look.
Connie, do you know?
I think they do. And if I can't believe I'm saying this. If I can be of help, you can put me in on that list of helping compile and get this going. Thanks for the smile, Matt. I love that. And the giggle.
I love how you railroaded yourself.
I know.
Thanks, Connie. We appreciate it.
No worries.
It actually would be a good place to house like a form if we come up with one that we don't already have. I thought we worked on this several years ago too, but
I mean, it's a resource.
Well, and it would be a great place to keep that information, because I know there's a lot of small PSAPs, small authorities that have no idea
Yeah. Same, there's probably no reason that the 911 program can't host the same form for download. Make it
Yeah,
the
we
same.
can put it in both places. It's no problem.
Oh, yeah,
We just
exactly.
have to make sure that we're keeping it,
Current.
yeah, keeping them matched. Yeah, there's a lot of sample documents on the Resource Center website, so I don't know where to go to find it, but
I
Connie,
know
I'm
I've
sure you
seen
can
it.
find
Yeah, I've seen it when I was perusing around, but to tell you where it's at right at this moment, I can't. I'll look.
Okay. But yeah, once we make one, we can store it on both websites and let people know that it's there.
Awesome. When do we want to meet again? Like I said, I know that people are trying to right now get this list together to raise their surcharge. And our letters need to go out November 30 by my calculations. Can be December 1st, but
When I count back 60 days, I get December 3rd. But
oh,
Yeah.
you're really precise about it.
Well, I got the same thing. It was just, December 3rd.
Okay.
did
But
you know you can put that in Google? You just put it in the search bars, type 60 days before
Yep.
February 1st, 2023, and it'll tell you the exact date.
You guys are way too technical for me.
Yeah. So, as an example, we're looking to pass a resolution in October, matching the new threshold.
Yeah, I have two boards in the same boat.
Should have just kept it at 70 cents, man. This is the thing. Put that on the list of things you can only say if you're on a virtual meeting, so nobody can throw a shoe at you.
Right? You ducked anyway.
Yeah.
Next time we see each other face to face, you get in the shoe.
No, it's
Okay.
good.
When do we want to meet again?
Well, why would we need to meet again?
I don't know that we do, other than
Is there-
maybe, I
Do we
don't
want to
know.
look at? Do we want to meet to look at a draft template form?
I think we want to meet for the form and get that settled. And I think we want to put something together. And we may not need to meet to do this. The next task force is the 13th of November, right? Wait.
10th.
10th of November. Okay. So what I'm wondering is, like, because every time I give a report on the collections prepaid, it's like, oh, nothing. Oh, nothing. But since we are moving forward with a form and trying to come up with a conglomerate list, and hopefully we can have something that people can pull from, is what I was thinking for that December 3rd letter.
So this is the last Tuesday of this month. We want to do the last Tuesday of October, and then perhaps have something to report at the advisory committee meeting.
That works for me. Does it work
And do
for
we
you?
want to review the form and review the combined database if we've gotten that far?
Yeah, that would be great. And can we house that at the, Jolene, can we house that contact list with you?
We could just put it on our website, right, Daryl?
Yeah.
Yeah, just put it there.
Yeah, I don't see
Okay.
any problem with that.
Okay.
In fact, we can start using that contact list instead of the one we've got up there right now.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Do we want to do a 3 o'clock again, or? I know I did a doodle poll for this and there were a lot more people who signed up.
The Rapid SOS Partner Showcase is that day, but it only goes to 2 o'clock. So we could do it later in the afternoon, or we could do a different day.
3 o'clock again on that day.
Yeah, they'll
Works
give us
for
an
me.
hour between both meetings.
I'm sorry, what's the proposed time? And this is for the 25th, you say?
1500 Mountain Time on October 25th.
That's 3 o'clock, Jolene.
I'm good for that. It's so far.
Well, if you have it on your calendar, then you can't like block it off.
Want to bet?
Right?
I plan to be busy.
I plan to be busy that day. Let me think of what I got going.
No, it's open so far.
And the Rapid SOS Partner Showcase, is that in person?
No, it's
No, it's
virtual.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, Monday looks completely clear to me. I don't know about anybody else. If we want to do a different day,
That's good for me too.
24th.
24, yeah. Anytime.
And,
Preference, Matt.
um,
Are you still doing your 3-day weekends trying to burn up your?
they're actually, so I just got off of a 5-day weekend, but yes, trying to burn up 14 days of leave before the first of the year. Monday's open for me too. I will say Monday mornings are, like, for all of us, probably a rough time.
$1,000 Mountain on that day.
Works for me.
10 a.m. You said?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I
Can you
will
send
make
that out
it. I will make it right now.
Thank
Send
you.
it out.
124. All right. Well, thank you all for your input. I appreciate it. And at least we have something to report back to the task force. And then after that, I don't know, like I said, once we get these things kind of moving, I don't know. I'm kind of wondering what the purpose of this committee is, I guess, after that. But we can talk about that next time or the time after that, once we get some things done.
Food for thought. It could be a resource when a problem occurs that an authority wants to bring up.
True.
And otherwise it's just in standby mode,
I like that idea.
like the outage committee, in a sense.
Vaya con Dios, muchachos.
Bye. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you to all of you who volunteered or got volunteered to do stuff or provide stuff.
Yeah. Thank you all.
All right. Take care, all. Bye.
All right. Bye.